In this section, we're going to talk about centralization, decentralization, and the different types of responsibility centers. First, let's take a look at centralized organizations. This is the game products company, and you have three divisions that are run by the game products company. There's the sporting goods division, the board games division, and the computer games division. The president of game products retained direct control over each business unit. There are no managers. All these three divisions report directly to the president of game products. That is a centralized organization. Now let's contrast that with a decentralized organization. Again, we're looking at the same game products company. Now in this particular case, this has been decentralized. What is decentralized? For each division the company has, there is a manager over each division who in turn report to the president. In this case, the president doesn't have to look at each division individually because there is a manager who looks over each division. The division manager reports to the president. This is called decentralized. So let's take a look at decentralization in more detail. We said decentralization was when companies split their organizations into different operating segments. Different companies decentralize in different ways. In the example that we saw earlier, that company decentralized based on divisions, sporting goods division, board games division, and so on, division or departments. That's one way companies decentralize. Another way is some companies decentralize by region, so geographic region. You may have North American operations and international operations. And then within North American operations, you'll decentralize further by having a manager for each region. That would be a geographic decentralization. Some companies decentralize by their function. I know some hotel chains, they decentralize by their functions, such as they'll have a group over they'll have manager of the housekeeping divisions, manager of customer service, manager of reservations. So they decentralize by the job function. And some other companies decentralize by their customer. You see sometimes Home Depot and some of the bigger companies that serve different types of customers split up their organization by consumer and commercial. Those would be decentralization by customer. Typically, companies decentralize by the best method for their company. So there's no set means. If a particular company wants to decentralize by, light colored hair and dark colored hair, that is perfectly fine. It just depends on what works for the business. So why do companies decentralize? Because there are a lot of advantages to it. The advantages are that it frees up top management's time. If you have divisional managers looking over different parts of the operation, the top management can spend their time more efficiently by doing other things. When you have decentralization, you can use an expert's knowledge to for a particular function. For example, if you hire a human resources manager, that particular manager is specialized in human resources. Whereas if you weren't decentralized, or rather if you were centralized, you would be doing that function yourself. Improves customer relations because the customer has several people they can go to. Also, this structure provides training. If you have decentralization, you can provide cross-training between different departments and different levels of management. Finally, it improves motivation and retention. There is a set path. People know that you can get promoted to a manager and then hire a manager and so on and so forth. Whereas if everybody reported directly to the president, as in a centralized company, you would pretty much either have to take over the company or move. Those are your two choices. So given those options, if you're working for a decentralized company, that improves more motivation as well as retention. Keep in mind, all the advantages of decentralization are disadvantages of centralization. What are the disadvantages of decentralization? Typically, You get duplication of costs. For example, think of a big company like Pepsi. Pepsi has Frito-Lay. They also own certain food chains like KFC and Taco Bell. If you've got a human resource department for each division, so Frito-Lay will have a human resource division, um, KFC will have a human resource division, there's duplication of costs there. Whereas if you had one centralized division, all the human resource decisions would be taken by one person. So that would be a disadvantage. Another disadvantage is there are potential problems achieving goal congruence. Goal congruence occurs when the goals of each segment manager are aligning with the goals of top management. So you want the goals of each segment manager to be the same as the goals of the top management. However, when you've got a huge decentralized organization, you may have trouble achieving that goal congruence. The way I tell my students is think of goal congruence as a flock of birds flying in unison. So you see these birds flying, and they're all flying in the same direction and all flying together in harmony. However, if one or two of them fly in the opposite direction, there'll be chaos. Just like those flock of birds, you want your managers to have the same goals as top management and be working towards them. But it doesn't always happen. Sometimes one or two managers may have conflicting goals, and that may not be the same goals that the top management want to achieve. For example, let's take two managers in a decentralized organization. First, let's take the production department manager. The production department manager's goal would be to produce quality products. The purchasing department manager, who buys direct materials that the production manager uses in his products, their goal is to keep costs low. So purchasing department's goal is to keep costs low, and the production department's goal is to produce quality products. The purchasing department manager may decide to go ahead and buy inferior products to make their costs lower. If you buy inferior products, production managers' quality of their product goes down. So that is not achieving goal congruence. There's a problem with achieving goal congruence there. That's just a very simplified example of goal congruence. Remember, the disadvantage of decentralization are the advantages of centralization. Decentralized companies have to come up with performance evaluation systems. The reason they do that is they need to find a way to provide upper management with feedback on the performance of the decentralized segment managers. To be effective, this performance evaluation system should be clearly communicated. They should provide benchmarks that promote goal congruence and coordination between the segments, and it should motivate segment managers. Responsibility accounting is a system for evaluating the performance of each responsibility center and its manager. A responsibility center is defined as a part of an organization whose manager is accountable for planning and controlling activities. And responsibility accounting is where we only evaluate those managers who are responsible for each responsibility center. There are 4 types of responsibility centers. There's cost centers, revenue centers, profit centers, and investment centers. In a cost center, the managers are primarily responsible for expenses. So that particular manager only has control over expenses. An example would be the human resources department of an organization. The human resource department does not bring in any revenue. They can only control costs. So that would be a cost center. The same applies for the accounting department, the IT department, and a lot of departments, support services and support departments of an organization. A revenue center is where the manager is mainly responsible for bringing in revenues. Profit center managers are accountable for both revenues and costs. Because they're accountable for revenues and costs, they're responsible for the profits. The college bookstore would be an example of a profit center. The manager or the bookstore has control over revenues as well as costs. Finally, we have an investment center. For an investment center, the managers are responsible for revenues, controlling costs, but also efficiently managing the division's assets. Typically, investment centers are large divisions of a corporation. For example, Frito-Lay would be considered an investment center for Pepsi because the manager over Frito-Lay is responsible for generating revenues, controlling costs, and efficiently managing all Frito-Lay's assets. The manager over Frito-Lay has decisions to enter into agreements to build new building, make capital investments, so that it's considered an investment center.